The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been going for 6 hours. Ambassador Valrana of the Theshan Concordat stood before the circular chamber, her silver skin reflecting the dim blue lights overhead. Around her sat representatives from 12 different species, and every single one of them looked terrified. "Another system has fallen," she announced, her voice steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. The Krithak swarm consumed the Bella colonies in less than 4 days. That makes 17 systems in 3 cycles. The chamber erupted in panicked voices. The Morvani delegate, a large creature covered in soft fur, slammed his appendage on the desk. "How is this possible? We sent our entire defense fleet to Bella. They had 300 ships." Valrana pulled up the holographic display. The footage was horrific. The Krithak swarm moved like a living wave through space. Billions of silicon-based insect creatures, each the size of a transport vehicle, flowing from ship to ship. They didn't use weapons in the traditional sense. They simply overwhelmed everything with numbers, tearing through metal hulls with diamond-hard mandibles and converting all biological matter into more of themselves. "Our weapons are useless," General Court of the Vratian military stated. He was a veteran of 200 years, and Valrana had never seen him look so defeated. "We destroyed thousands of them at Bella. They adapted. Within hours, they had grown thicker carapaces. Our plasma weapons no longer penetrate their armor." "What about negotiation?" asked the Pelthian ambassador, her multiple eyes blinking in sequence. "Every species can be reasoned with. Every conflict can be resolved through dialogue." "They don't communicate," Valrana said quietly. "We've tried every frequency, every language protocol in our databases. The Krithaks don't negotiate. They don't talk. They consume and reproduce. That's all they do." The chamber fell silent. For 3,000 years, the Galactic Council had maintained peace through diplomacy and defensive military doctrine. They built shields, not swords. They formed blockades, not assault fleets. War was something that happened in ancient history, before civilized species learned better ways. But the Krithak swarm didn't care about civilization. Valrana had spent the last week doing something forbidden. She had access to restricted archives, the sealed database of dangerous knowledge that the Council kept locked away. She had been looking for anything that might help. Any weapon or strategy from the old days that could stop the swarm. Instead, she had found Earth. "I have a proposal," Valrana said, her voice cutting through the worried murmurs. "But you're not going to like it." She activated a new holographic file. The Council members leaned forward, reading the classification marker that appeared. "Quarantine World, Class 12 Deathworld, no contact authorized." "This is a planet called Earth," Valrana explained. "It was discovered 200 cycles ago by a Theshan scout ship. The ship observed the planet from orbit for 3 months before fleeing and filing this report." The hologram showed a blue and green planet, beautiful from a distance. But the data scrolling beside it told a different story. Gravity, 2.1 times galactic standard. Atmospheric oxygen content. Toxic levels. Native life forms, 87% classified as lethal. The dominant species, bipedal persistence predators. "Why was it quarantined?" the Morvani delegate asked. "Because everything on that planet is designed to kill," Valrana said. She pulled up images from the scout report. Massive creatures with teeth as long as a Theshan's arm. Tiny insects carrying enough poison to kill 20 council members. Plants that could dissolve flesh. Microscopic organisms that caused horrible diseases. "And the dominant species?" General Cord asked, zooming in on a blurry image of a human. "They call themselves humans," Valrana said. "They're apex predators who survived by becoming better at killing than everything else on their planet. They have forward-facing eyes for tracking prey, dense bone structure to survive impacts that would shatter our skeletons, redundant organ systems, the ability to function in extreme temperatures and environments. She paused, letting that sink in. The scout report says they evolved through constant warfare, not just against their environment, but against each other. They spent 10,000 years developing better and better ways to kill their own species. The report recommended permanent quarantine because contact with them would be too dangerous. "You can't be serious," the Pelthian ambassador said, her voice rising. "You want to invite Deathworld predators to our space? Do you know how many protocols that violates?" 17 systems are gone, Valrana shot back. "In 3 more cycles, the swarm will reach the core worlds. Your world. My world. Every world in this chamber. Our current strategy is failing. We need something the swarm has never faced before. We need meat monsters to fight monsters," General Court said quietly. The debate raged for hours. Some council members called it suicide. Others called it betrayal of everything the council stood for. But slowly, as more reports came in of swarm movements toward the core systems, the opposition crumbled. The final vote was close. 7 in favor, 5 against. Permission granted to contact Earth. Valrana returned to her quarters and composed the message herself. She kept it simple, encoding it in mathematical sequences that any technological species would understand. Then she added a single quantum-encrypted audio message in what the database said was the most common human language. "This is Ambassador Valrana of the Galactic Council. We are under attack by an enemy we cannot defeat. 17 of our worlds have fallen. Billions are dead. Our military forces are failing. We are a peaceful coalition with no experience in total warfare. We are dying, and we cannot fight back effectively. This message comes to you as a desperate plea. Can you help us?" She attached the coordinates of Bastion Station, the Council's last major military installation, and fired the message toward Earth using the fastest quantum transmission available. Then she waited 40-7 hours later. Her console beeped. A return message from Earth. Valrana's hands shook as she opened it. The message was brief. Just 8 words in basic galactic standard, but they sent chills through her entire body. Coordinates received. Hold the line. We're coming. Valrana sat back in her chair, staring at those words. She had just invited predators from a quarantined Deathworld to enter Council space. She had convinced the Council to call for help. From a species so dangerous at first. Contact had been forbidden for 2 centuries. She had asked monsters to save them from monsters. Now she could. Only hope that when this was over, the humans would be willing to leave. Because another thought had occurred to her as she sat in the darkness of her quarters, one that terrified her almost as much as the swarm. What if the cure was worse than the disease? What if they couldn't make the humans leave? Outside her window, the stars seemed dimmer somehow. And somewhere out there, moving toward Council space at speeds the scout report said should be impossible. Humanity was coming to war. The alarm went off at 0300 hours in the United Terran Command Center, buried 2 kilometers beneath the Colorado Rockies. General Sarah Okonkwo was already awake, staring at the decoded alien message on her screen for the 100th time. She had been waiting for this moment for 15 years. "Ma'am, we've confirmed the signal is legitimate," said Colonel Hayes, rushing into her office. "The quantum encryption matches the patterns we've been monitoring from the Galactic Council for the past 3 decades. This is first contact." "First contact," Sarah repeated, a slight smile crossing her face. "They're dying, and they're asking us for help." She stood and walked to the window overlooking the command center. Hundreds of analysts and technicians worked at their stations, all of them aware that human history had just changed forever. For generations, humanity had known they weren't alone. They had picked up alien transmissions, decoded alien languages, watched from a distance as a galaxy full of peaceful species went about their business. And humanity had prepared. "Activate Reaper Protocol," Sarah ordered. Colonel Hayes hesitated. "Ma'am, are you sure?" "Reaper Protocol means—" "I know exactly what it means," Sarah interrupted. "The aliens don't want diplomats. They want soldiers. They want killers. That's what Earth does best." Within hours, the order went out to military installations across the globe. The message was simple. Earth needed volunteers for humanity's first journey to the stars. Not scientists. Not diplomats, warriors. The requirements were specific. Special operations experience. Combat deployment history. Psychological evaluation showing high stress tolerance and aggression management. Physical fitness scores in the top 1%. Willingness to be the first humans that aliens would ever meet. Within 24 hours, they had 50,000 volunteers. By the end of the week, that number had tripled. Every Special Forces unit on Earth wanted in. Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, British SAS, Russian Spetsnaz, Israeli Shatet 13, Chinese Snow Leopards, Brazilian BOP, operators from nations that had been enemies just decades ago, all united by a single desire, to show the galaxy what humanity could do. Sarah and her selection committee chose 10,000. The best of the best. Men and women who had spent their entire adult lives studying the art of violence. They weren't soldiers in the traditional sense. They were artists, and their medium was controlled, precise, overwhelming force. Sergeant Marcus Webb was among the first selected. He was 32, a veteran of 3 wars and more classified operations than he was allowed to discuss. When the selection notice appeared on his console, he was in the gym, working through his daily routine of exercises that would have hospitalized a normal person. "Webb, you're in," his commanding officer said, tossing him a tablet. "Report to Site 7 for briefing and enhancement." Site 7 was a facility that officially didn't exist. Deep in the Australian outback, shielded from satellites and prying eyes, it had been built for exactly this purpose. When Marcus arrived, he found himself among warriors he recognized from reputation, if not from sight. The deadliest humans Earth had ever produced, all gathered in one place. Dr. Chun ran the briefing. She was a xenobiologist, one of the few humans who had been studying the intercepted alien transmissions for decades. She looked tired but excited. "Everything you're about to meet evolved on what we call garden worlds," she explained, projecting images of various alien species on the screen. Low gravity, usually around 0.4 to 0.6 G filtered atmospheres with low oxygen content. Stable climates. No large predators. She pulled up an image of a Deshan, the silver-skinned species that had sent the distress call. "This is Ambassador Valrana. Her species averages 1.6 meters tall and weighs about 40 kilograms. Their bone density is roughly 1/3 of human standard. They evolved from herd animals on a planet with 0.5 G gravity." Marcus studied the image. The alien looked delicate, almost fragile, like she would break if he sneezed too hard. "What about the enemy?" someone asked. Dr. Chun's expression darkened. She showed footage that had been intercepted from alien military transmissions. The Kurthak swarm looked like something from a nightmare. Massive insectoid creatures flowing through space in countless billions, tearing apart ships and converting everything organic into more of themselves. "They're silicon-based, not carbon-based like us," Dr. Chun explained. "They operate as a hive mind. Individual units aren't intelligent, but the collective shows problem-solving ability and rapid adaptation. They've destroyed 17 alien star systems in 3 years. How do the aliens fight them? Marcus asked. Defensively. The Galactic Council species have something they call civilized warfare doctrine. Basically, they try to minimize casualties, preserve infrastructure, and avoid escalation. They wait for enemies to surrender or negotiate. The room full of Special Forces operators stared at her in silence. Then someone in the back started laughing. Within seconds, the entire room had joined in. They're fighting a genocidal spacebug army. Defensively? Marcus said, wiping tears from his eyes. No wonder they're losing. Over the next 3 weeks, the selected soldiers underwent enhancements. Neural interfaces that would let them process tactical data at inhuman speeds. Adaptive combat suits that could survive in vacuum, toxic atmospheres, and extreme temperatures. Experimental weapons ranging from railguns to monofilament blades. Genetic therapies that increase their already formidable strength and endurance. They also received crash courses in alien biology, culture, and language. Marcus learned how to kill 17 different species in unarmed combat. He learned which species could survive in which environments. He learned how the aliens thought, how they fought, how they would react to humans. Most importantly, he learned that the galaxy had never seen anything like Earth. The transport fleet was ready 2 months after the initial message. 12 ships, retrofitted military vessels equipped with experimental FTL, drives based on technology reverse-engineered from alien transmissions. They weren't elegant like the alien ships in the intercepted footage. They were brutal, efficient, covered in armor and weapons. The flagship was the UTS-F Indomitable, a carrier that held 3,000 soldiers and enough firepower to level a continent. General Sarah Okonkwo commanded from its bridge, her daughter Lieutenant Jennifer Okonkwo serving as tactical officer. Marcus stood in the hangar bay with his squad, watching as the last supplies were loaded. His team was small, just 6 operators, each specializing in different aspects of warfare. They had trained together for 2 months and felt like they'd been together for years. Think the aliens will like us? Asked Chun, no relation to Dr. Chun, his demolitions expert. I don't think they're supposed to like us, Marcus replied. I think they're supposed to point us at their problem and get out of the way. The launch was scheduled for 0600 hours. As Marcus strapped into his acceleration seat, he pulled up the mission briefing one final time. The Galactic Council was gathering its remaining military forces at a place called Bastion Station. That's where the human fleet would make first contact. General Okonkwo's voice came over the ship-wide comm system. All personnel, this is the General. In a few minutes, we will become the first humans to leave our solar system. The first to meet alien species. The first to fight in an interstellar war. Earth is sending us not as diplomats or explorers, but as warriors. That is what they need. That is what we are. She paused, and Marcus could hear the steel in her voice. The galaxy is about to learn what Earth breeds. Show them. The engines fired. The fleet accelerated, reality bent, and 12 human warships vanished into faster-than-light travel, carrying humanity's best and most dangerous toward the stars, toward war, toward a galaxy that had no idea what was coming. Bastion Station hung in space like a massive flower made of metal and light. It was the pride of the Galactic Council, a military installation designed to coordinate fleet movements across 50 star systems. Today, it was also the last major stronghold between the Krithak swarm and the core worlds. Ambassador Velrana stood in the observation deck, watching the Council's remaining military forces gather. 3,000 ships from a dozen different species, all that remained after 3 years of devastating losses. It should have been an impressive sight. Instead, it just reminded her how much they had already lost. Ambassador, we're detecting unusual signatures on the outer edge of the system, said the station's Morvani sensor operator. His fur was standing on end, a sign of nervousness. 12 contacts, moving at speeds that should be impossible. Velrana's heart raced. The humans? I believe so, Ambassador. But these readings can't be right. They're showing mass displacement consistent with warships. But they're generating energy signatures 3 times higher than our largest battle carriers. The human fleet dropped out of FTL travel in perfect formation. And Velrana got her first look at the species she had invited to Council space. The ships were nothing like Council vessels. Where Council ships were smooth and curved, built for efficiency and beauty, the human ships were angular and brutal. Every surface bristled with weapons. They looked like they had been designed by someone who viewed space as a battlefield, not a highway. This is the UTSF Indomitable. General Sarah Okonkwo commanding. Came a transmission in flawless galactic standard, requesting permission to dock and begin coordination with Council Military Command. Velrana granted permission, her hand shaking slightly as she did. 20 minutes later, she stood in the main docking bay, waiting with General Cord and several other Council members to greet humanity. The airlock cycled. The door opened. Sergeant Marcus Webb was the first human Velrana ever saw in person, and he was terrifying. He stood roughly 2 meters tall, which was huge by Council standards. His body was covered in dense muscle that served no purpose on a low-gravity world, but made perfect sense for a planet with twice the gravity. He moved with fluid precision, each step controlled and purposeful. His eyes were forward-facing, predator eyes, and when they locked onto Velrana, she felt like prey being sized up. Behind him came more humans, each as intimidating as the last. They wore dark combat suits that looked like armor, and even without weapons visible, they radiated danger. General Okonkwo emerged last. She was shorter than Marcus, but somehow more intimidating. She had the bearing of someone who had commanded armies, made impossible decisions, and lived with the consequences. Her eyes swept the docking bay, taking in every detail, every potential threat. Ambassador Velrana, General Okonkwo said, extending her hand in what the briefing files had said was a human greeting. Thank you for the invitation. Velrana reached out hesitantly and clasped the offered hand. The human's grip was firm, controlled, but Velrana could feel the strength behind it. This human could crush her hand like paper if she wanted to. The realization was both terrifying and oddly reassuring. General, welcome to Bastion Station. We're grateful you've come. Let's hope you still feel that way when this is over. Okonkwo replied with a slight smile that didn't reach her eyes. The tactical briefing took place in the station's command center. Council generals presented their defensive strategies using holographic displays. They showed fleet positions, evacuation routes, civilian protection protocols. It was all very organized, very civilized. The humans listened in silence. Velrana watched their faces and saw something that worried her. They looked disappointed. Question, Captain Rodriguez said when the briefing finished. He was the Indomitable's tactical officer. You've been fighting this war for 3 years? Correct. General Court confirmed. And your entire strategy has been defensive? Holding positions, protecting civilians, minimizing casualties? Of course. The Council's military doctrine has been refined over 3,000 years. We fight to protect, not to destroy. The humans exchanged glances. Lieutenant Okonkwo, the general's daughter, leaned forward. General Court, with respect, you can't win a war against an extinction-level threat by fighting defensively. The Swarm doesn't care about your civilization. They don't care about casualties. They just consume and spread. You have to be willing to be worse than they are. Worse? Velrana said, shocked. We're trying to preserve civilization, not destroy it. Sometimes you have to destroy to preserve. General Okonkwo said quietly. That's a lesson Earth learned the hard way. Before Velrana could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. Swarm contacts, the sensor operator shouted. Thousands of them, incoming from Vector 773. Early this attack wasn't scheduled for another 2 weeks. The command center erupted into controlled chaos. Council ships began forming their standard defensive pattern, moving to create overlapping fields of fire while maintaining safe distances from each other. The human ships didn't join the formation. What are they doing? Velrana demanded, watching the tactical display as the 12 human vessels accelerated toward the incoming swarm. They're attacking, General Court said, his voice filled with disbelief. They're flying straight into the swarm formation. On the display, the human ships punched through the swarm's leading edge like knives. Their weapons were unlike anything the Council used. Railguns that fired solid projectiles at relativistic speeds. Missile pods that launched hundreds of warheads at once. Point defense systems that created walls of fire around each ship. But that wasn't the most shocking part. They're launching boarding pods, the sensor operator said, his voice trembling. They're boarding the swarm bioships. Velrana pulled up the helmet camera feed from the human soldiers, and immediately wished she hadn't. The humans fought like nothing she had ever imagined. They moved through the swarm bioships in zero gravity as if they had been born to it, firing weapons, throwing explosives, using blades when the fighting got too close. The Krithaks were each the size of a transport vehicle, with diamond-hard carapaces and mandibles that could tear through metal. The humans tore through them like they were nothing. Sergeant Marcus Webb's squad moved as a unit, each member covering the others with practiced precision. When a Krithak's drone lunged at Chun, Marcus shot it mid-air with a railgun that punched through its carapace like paper. When 3 more swarmed from a side corridor, Rodriguez triggered an explosive that turned them into fragments. The footage was horrific and mesmerizing. The humans were outnumbered 1,000 to 1, fighting in environments that would kill most council species instantly. Hard vacuum, toxic atmospheres, the freezing cold of space itself. And they were winning. Status report. General Okonkwo's voice came over the command channel, calm despite the chaos. Swarm Bioship 7-3 destroyed, ma'am, Marcus reported. His breathing was steady, like he was taking a walk instead of fighting for his life. Moving to target 7-4. Copy that, Sergeant. Be advised, you've got heavy concentrations on decks 3 and 4. Understood. Chen, you heard the General. Time to make some noise? Velrana watched as the human called Chun placed charges throughout the bioship's internal structure. The squad evacuated through a breach in the hull, jumping into hard vacuum without hesitation. Their suits protected them as the charges detonated, tearing the massive bioship apart from the inside. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the swarm fleet was in full retreat, something that had never happened before in recorded council history. The humans had destroyed 47 bioships and damaged hundreds more. The council's defensive fleet had contributed, but everyone knew the truth. The humans had won this battle. Back in the docking bay, Velrana watched the human soldiers return. They were laughing, trading stories, showing each other footage from their helmet cameras. They were comparing kill counts like it was a game. One human, a woman named Sergeant Taylor, was showing her squad a recording of herself knife-fighting a Krethok's drone in a zero-gravity corridor. Did you see its face when I went for the eyes? She laughed. Didn't know bugs could look surprised. Velrana felt sick. These humans had just survived what should have been a suicide mission, and they were enjoying it. They had fought in conditions that would terrify any council species, and they were treating it like sport. She approached General Okonkwo, who was reviewing battle reports on a tablet. Your people fought. Effectively, Velrana said carefully. We did our job. Okonkwo replied without looking up. General, your soldiers seem to enjoy combat. Is that normal for humans? Okonkwo finally looked at her, and Valrana saw something in her eyes that made her species' evolutionary alarm bells ring. Ambassador, humans evolved on a planet that tried to kill us every day for millions of years. We survived by being better at violence than everything else. Yes, some of us enjoy it. That's what makes us good at it. Valrana returned to her quarters that night and stared out at the stars. The council had asked for help from monsters. They had gotten it. Now she was beginning to understand what that truly meant. 3 months into the campaign, the Galactic Council was winning for the first time in 3 years. The Krithak swarm, which had seemed unstoppable, was retreating across every front. 12 systems had been liberated. The Council's territory was growing again instead of shrinking, but the cost was becoming clear. And it terrified Valrana. She stood in the tactical command center of Bastion Station, watching a holographic map of the current offensive. The human fleet had proposed a coordinated counterattack to liberate the Helvan system, a heavily populated world that had been under swarm control for 6 months. The Council had agreed, grateful for the humans' military expertise. Now Valrana was beginning to regret that decision. General Okonkwo, what is Operation Scorched Earth? She asked, reading the designation on the tactical plan. The human general didn't look up from her console. Exactly what it sounds like, Ambassador. We're going to make sure the swarm can't use Helvan for resources. But Helvan had a population of 12 billion before the swarm arrived. There could be survivors, refugees hiding in underground shelters. General Okonkwo finally met her eyes, and her expression was cold. After 6 months of swarm occupation? Ambassador, there are no survivors. The swarm converts all organic matter. Your people are already dead. We're just making sure the swarm can't use their biomass. The attack on Helvan began 18 hours later. Valrana watched the operation unfold, and with every minute, her horror grew. The humans didn't fight to liberate. They fought to annihilate. First came the orbital bombardment. Human ships positioned themselves in high orbit and fired kinetic weapons at every concentration of swarm bioships on the surface. The projectiles hit with the force of small nuclear weapons, creating craters kilometers wide. Then came the boarding teams. But they weren't trying to save the planet. They were using something the humans called denial tactics. Sergeant Marcus Webb's squad fought their way into a massive swarm hive complex, placed nuclear charges throughout its structure, and detonated them before evacuating. Nuclear weapons? General Court said, his voice shaking with disbelief. Inside a city? The radiation will make that area uninhabitable for centuries. The city is already dead. Lieutenant Jennifer Okonkwo replied from her tactical station. And radiation is less of a problem than letting the swarm rebuild. This way, they get nothing. But the worst part came when the human forces reached the swarm's central processing node, the biological equivalent of a command center. Standard Council doctrine would be to destroy it with precision strikes, minimizing collateral damage. The humans used biological warfare. Valrana watched in stunned silence as human soldiers deployed canisters of weaponized Earth pathogens, modified to target the swarm's silicon-based biochemistry. The effect was devastating. The swarm drones began dying by the thousands, their carapaces dissolving, their hive mind connection fragmenting. This is a war crime, Valrana whispered. By whose laws? Captain Rodriguez asked. He was standing next to her, monitoring the operation. The swarm doesn't have soldiers and civilians. Every single unit is a combatant. Every single unit exists only to consume and reproduce. We're using every tool available to stop them. But biological weapons, nuclear weapons, scorched earth tactics. These are banned by council law. We're not bound by council law, Rodriguez said simply. And if we were, you'd be dead right now. The swarm doesn't care about your laws. Why should we fight with one hand tied behind our backs? The liberation or destruction of Helvan took 4 days. When it was over, the swarm presence in the system had been completely eliminated. Not driven away, not defeated, exterminated. The humans had hunted down every single bioship, every single drone, every single trace of swarm presence and destroyed it. But the planet itself was ruined. Massive craters covered the surface. Radiation zones glowed on sensor scans. The cities were gone, reduced to rubble. Nothing lived on Helvan anymore. Not the swarm, but not any possible survivors either. The council held an emergency session. Valrana found herself at the center of an angry debate. This is unconscionable, the Pelthian ambassador shouted. We asked the humans to save us, not to become worse than the swarm. They're winning, General Court said quietly. For the first time in 3 years, we're not losing ground. We're taking it back. At what cost? Look at Helvan. It's a dead world now. It was already a dead world, the Marvani delegate argued. The swarm killed everyone there 6 months ago. The humans just made sure the swarm couldn't use it as a base. The debate raged for hours. Finally, Valrana demanded a private meeting with General Okonkwo. They met in a small conference room, just the two of them. You promised to help us, Valrana said, struggling to keep her voice steady. Not to destroy everything. General Okonkwo sat across from her, hands folded on the table. We are helping you. The swarm is retreating. Your core worlds are safe. In 6 months, we've accomplished what your military couldn't do in 3 years. By using tactics that violate every principle the Council stands for. Your principles, Okonkwo said, leaning forward, are why you were losing. You fight wars like they're debates. You try to minimize casualties and preserve infrastructure and maintain the moral high ground. That works when you're fighting other civilized species. It doesn't work against an enemy that wants you extinct. Valrana stood, pacing the room. There has to be a better way. A more civilized way. Ambassador, let me tell you about Earth, Okonkwo said. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it that made Valrana stop pacing. My species spent 10,000 years fighting itself. We had wars that killed hundreds of millions. We built weapons that could destroy our entire planet. We did horrible things to each other. She pulled up a holographic display showing images from Earth's history. Battles, bombings, mushroom clouds rising over cities. We learned something from all that death. We learned that if you're fighting for survival, there's no such thing as fighting dirty. There's only winning and losing. And losing means extinction. But you can't just, we came here because you asked for help, Okonkwo interrupted. You didn't ask for diplomats or mediators. You asked for warriors. You asked us to save you from an enemy that was going to make your species extinct. Well, this is how Earth fights extinction-level threats. We don't compromise. We don't negotiate. We don't hope the enemy will get tired and go home. We fight until they're gone. She stood, walking to the window that looked out on the space. You want to know the truth, Ambassador. The reason the swarm can't adapt to us isn't because our weapons are better. It's because we're unpredictable. The swarm's hive mind is designed to process tactical information and adapt. It can handle any logical threat response. But you're not logical, Valrana said quietly. Exactly. We use deception. We bluff. We make decisions based on spite and stubbornness instead of optimal outcomes. We do things that make no tactical sense because they feel right. The swarm can't predict that because it's not logical. It's human. Okonkwo turned back to face her. You asked how we can just turn it off. The violence. The truth is we can't. We just learned how to point it at things that need killing. Give us enemies. We're heroes. Don't give us enemies." She let the implication hang in the air. Valrana felt cold. She had invited these humans to Council Space, thinking they would be soldiers, controlled, disciplined. Instead, she had unleashed something that had spent millennia learning how to be the most efficient killers in their corner of the galaxy. "I don't know if I made the right choice," Valrana admitted. "Neither do I," Okonkwo said honestly. "But it's the choice you made. Now we all have to live with it." The offensive continued. Over the next 3 months, the humans liberated system after system using their brutal, uncompromising tactics. The swarm retreated further and further, unable to adapt to an enemy that didn't fight according to any recognizable pattern. The Council grew more uncomfortable with each victory. The humans were saving them, yes, but they were also showing the galaxy something that had been hidden for 200 years. Earth wasn't just a death world. It was a factory that had spent millions of years producing the most dangerous apex predators in known space. And now those predators were loose among the stars. Valrana watched another victory celebration in the docking bay. The humans were laughing again, trading stories, planning the next operation. They looked happy, fulfilled, like they had finally found what they were meant to do. She wondered if the galaxy would ever be the same. 6 months after the humans arrived, the war was over. The Krthak swarm was extinct. Not defeated, not driven back to some distant corner of the galaxy. Extinct. The human military doctrine had been simple and absolute. Total warfare with no sanctuaries. Pursuit to complete elimination, and zero tolerance for any surviving remnants that could rebuild. The final swarm hive had been located in a dead system at the edge of Council Space. General Okonkwo had personally led the assault, bringing the entire human fleet and half of the remaining Council forces. The battle lasted 2 days. When it was finished, the humans had sterilized every planet, moon, and asteroid in the system with nuclear and biological weapons. There were no swarm survivors. There would be no swarm return. The threat that had consumed 17 star systems and killed hundreds of billions was gone. From the galaxy forever, the Council held a grand ceremony at Bastion Station to honor their saviors. Valrana stood on the ceremonial platform, looking out at the assembled representatives from all 12 Council species. Behind her stood the human soldiers who had fought and bled across dozens of star systems. They wore their dress uniforms, standing at attention, looking every bit the heroes the galaxy was celebrating. But Valrana knew the truth. She had seen too much in the past 6 months. "Today, we honor those who saved us from extinction," she began, her voice echoing through the massive chamber. "The human warriors who answered our desperate call and drove back the darkness. On behalf of the Galactic Council, I extend our deepest gratitude and offer full membership in our coalition." The chamber erupted in applause. Some of it was genuine, some of it was polite, and some of it, Valrana noticed, was forced. Not everyone was happy about inviting the humans to stay. General Okonkwo stepped forward to accept the honor. She gave a brief speech about cooperation between species and hope for the future. She said all the right things. But Valrana watched the other humans, the soldiers standing in formation, and saw something that worried her. They looked bored. These warriors who had spent 6 months fighting an extinction-level threat, who had found purpose and meaning in combat, were now standing in a ceremony that probably felt endless to them. A few were fidgeting. Several kept glancing at the exits. One Sergeant Marcus Webb, Valrana recognized, was clearly running through combat scenarios in his head based on how his eyes kept scanning the room's tactical positions. The ceremony ended. The council members dispersed to discuss the political aftermath. And that's when the real arguments began. Valrana found herself in a closed session with the other ambassadors and military leaders. The debate was fierce. We should give them whatever they want, the Morvani delegate argued. They saved us. Without them, we would all be dead. That's exactly why we need to be careful, the Pelthian ambassador countered. We've seen what they're capable of. We've seen how they think. Do we really want a species like that as equals in the council? What choice do we have? General Cord asked. If we try to send them away now, after everything they've done, it could be seen as an insult. Or worse, a threat. So we're afraid of them, someone said. Yes, Cord replied bluntly. I spent 6 months fighting alongside them. I've studied their tactics, their history, their culture. They're not like us. They see violence as a tool, not a last resort. They spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing each other. What happens when they don't have enemies to fight anymore? The Vraxian military advisor pulled up data on his console. I've been analyzing Earth's history. In the past 5,000 years, there hasn't been a single century without a major war somewhere on their planet. They've been in continuous conflict for their entire recorded history. That's not unusual for developing species, Valrana said, trying to be fair. It is when they're still doing it after achieving spaceflight, the advisor replied. Earth unified politically only 70 years ago. They built weapons capable of destroying their entire civilization and came within hours of using them. Multiple times. They're not peaceful by nature. They just learned how to direct their aggression outward. The debate raged for hours. Finally, they reached a compromise. Earth would be offered membership in the Galactic Council, but with certain restrictions. Their military forces would be limited. Their expansion into Council space would be monitored. They would be expected to follow Council law and cultural norms. Valrana was chosen to deliver the decision to General Okonkwo. They met in the same conference room where they had argued months ago about tactics and morality. The Council has decided to offer Earth full membership, Valrana began. I hear a but coming, Okonkwo said with a slight smile. But there will be restrictions. On military expansion, on territorial claims, on. I'm making sure we don't decide to conquer the galaxy ourselves, Okonkwo finished. It's fine, Ambassador. We expected this. Valrana was surprised. You did? Of course. You invited monsters to fight monsters. Now you're worried that the monsters you invited might be worse than the ones you were fighting. It's a reasonable concern. You're not offended? Okonkwo leaned back in her chair. Ambassador, Earth has been preparing for this moment for decades. We knew that when we made first contact, it would be on our terms or someone else's. You gave us the opportunity to show the galaxy what humanity can do when pushed. Now everyone knows. That was always the point. I don't understand. Before we arrived, you saw humans as a curiosity, a quarantined Deathworld species. Now you see us as something different. Dangerous, yes, but also capable, effective, necessary. Okonkwo smiled. You'll never look at Earth the same way again. Neither will anyone else in the galaxy. That's worth more than unrestricted membership. Valrana realized she had been outmaneuvered. The humans had never wanted to conquer the Council. They wanted respect, fear, even. They wanted to make sure that when the galaxy looked at Earth, it saw a species that could not be ignored or dismissed. They had succeeded. 1 week later, the human fleet prepared to depart. Valrana went to the docking bay to see them off. She found Sergeant Marcus Webb supervising the loading of equipment onto the Indomitable. Sergeant Webb, she called out. He turned, nodded respectfully. Ambassador, come to see us off. I wanted to ask you something. You and your soldiers. You seem to enjoy the fighting. The danger. Is that normal for humans? Webb considered the question for a moment. Enjoy isn't quite the right word. It's more like, we were built for this. Millions of years of evolution made us into persistent hunters and tribal warriors. Modern civilization is only a few thousand years old. The warrior instinct is still there, just beneath the surface. What happens when you don't have wars to fight? We find other ways to channel it. Sports, competition, exploration. Humans need challenges. Ambassador. We need to push against something. It's how we're wired. That's frightening. It should be, Webb said honestly. But it's also why we won. The swarm was a challenge. A real, existential threat. It brought out the best in us. Or the worst, depending on your perspective. Valrana watched as the last of the human soldiers boarded their ships. Will you come back? If we need you again? Probably, Webb said with a shrug. Humans have a hard time saying no to a good fight. But next time, make sure you really need us. Because once you invite us in, it's hard to make us leave. The human fleet departed Bastion Station in the same formation they had arrived in tight, disciplined and intimidating. As they accelerated toward the FTL jump point, General Okonkwo sent one final message to the Council. Thank you for the opportunity to serve. Earth stands ready to assist the Galactic Council in future crises. But remember what you learned these past 6 months. When you call Earth, you're not summoning saviors. You're releasing predators. Make sure you can afford the price. The transmission ended. The human ships vanished into FTL, heading back toward their distant death world. Valrana returned to her quarters and filed her final report on the human engagement. She tried to be objective, to list the facts without emotion. The humans had eliminated the swarm threat. They had saved Council civilization. They had done exactly what they were asked to do. But she couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy had fundamentally changed. Earth had been quiet for 200 years, content to stay behind its quarantine line, watching and waiting. Now, they had been invited out. They had shown the galaxy what Deathworld evolution produced. They had proven that in the vast, peaceful civilization of the Council, there was still room for warriors. And they had made it very clear that they intended to stay. 3 months later, Earth's formal application for Council membership was approved with the agreed-upon restrictions. The vote was close 7 in favor, 5 against, but it passed. Humanity was now officially part of the galactic community. On Earth, new recruits trained under an expanded version of Reaper Protocol. The soldiers who had fought in the Swarm War were treated as heroes, their tactics studied and refined. Humanity had tasted the stars and discovered they were good at something the galaxy desperately needed. They were good at war. General Sarah Okonkwo stood in the Colorado Command Center, watching reports of the first human diplomatic missions to various Council worlds. Some species welcomed them. Others kept their distance. All of them were cautious. Think they'll call us again? Colonel Hayes asked. Sarah smiled. Eventually. The galaxy is a dangerous place. There are other threats out there, other challenges. And when the Council faces something they can't handle with diplomacy and defensive tactics, they'll remember who saved them from the swarm. And we'll go. Of course we will. Because that's what Earth does. We answer the call. We face the monster. We do what needs to be done. She looked up at the screen showing the night sky above Colorado. Somewhere up there, among those stars, was a galaxy that now knew humanity existed. A galaxy that had learned what Earth could produce when evolution and necessity collided. The age of human isolation was over. The age of humanity among the stars had begun. And the galaxy would never be the same.